long time no see. And this is Sweet Pool again. I think it's part 5 up to this point. Yeah. Okay. This is Thanatos the Plague. Enigmatic, isn't it? Anyways, let's continue this gay goodness. Yeah. It's not like that yet, but you know, that's right. My throat just died, sorry. Okay, that's right, you're just like me, understand? Zenya flashed a toothy grin, his visible eye bulging.
お前も人間じゃねえんだよ。
What does that mean? Gasp. He didn't even know this, does he? For a moment, Yoji's mind went blank. What kind of nonsense was that? My throat is dead. Not human. The word stuck in his heart. It was ridiculous, insane, and yet...
哲夫はさ、あいつただの人間だよ。つまんないよ。だからさ。
Slowly, Zenya approached. Save for his sneering lips, his expression was hidden beneath the bill of his baseball cap. The rain continued to pour from the sky, soaking his hair and clothes. Zenya took another step and then...
仲良くしようよ。
Zenya's fist slammed into Yoji's gut. Jesus, bro. Forcing the breath from his lungs. Shit. His legs buckled. Bile rose in his throat.
こら。
He doubled over, coughing hard. A kick exploded in his stomach. Dude, what the hell? Oh god. What a plot twist. The dull pain echoed through his gut, turning his world grey. Before he knew it, he was lying on the ground. The smell of rain filled his nose.
こら、こら、こら。
Are you a sadist? Zenya screamed as he sent kick after kick into Yoji's stomach, shoulders, back, and anywhere he could reach. The pain was a blur now, a haze that enveloped his whole body, and he could do nothing but grit his teeth and bear it.
顔はさ、殴らないで。置いて、やるよ。
Zenya's cheerful voice rang out. True to his word, he focused his attacks on Yoji's torso. Yoji whimpered as the hard toe of Zenya's shoe dug into him again and again. His senses were beginning to fade into that agony. His thoughts were growing fuzzy. He wouldn't last much longer. But right before consciousness abandoned him completely, Zenya's breathless voice registered in his ears one last time.
まずはね、幼児のありのままを見せてほしいの。幼児のお気に入りを用意してあげるから。ね。
Ooh fucking woo. You might notice that I'm hyper, and that's probably because I've been on VR chat where I've met genuine people and cancerous memers, but that's OG. Yoji woke with a splitting headache. As he blinked to clear his eyes, he realized that he was lying on the floor. Where was he? His body hurt all over. The memories returned gradually. That's right. Zenya had asked to talk with him at school, then had jumped him right in the middle of the conversation. He had passed out at some point, and then his mind now functioning. He took in his surroundings. This definitely wasn't the academy. He was in a bedroom somewhere. Oh shit. The room was completely dark, save for a simple faint source of light, a TV sitting on a desk near the front of the room. Its screen showed nothing but static. Other than that, The bedroom was quite empty. If anything, it seemed more like a storage closet. As his senses returned, a strange scent tickled his nose. It was a powerful smell, like a kind of incense, and Yoji had a feeling it might be contributing to his headache. Whatever the case, his first priority was to get out of here. He attempted to sit up, only to discover that his arms were limp. His muscles were sore, like the day after an intense workout. Regardless, he struggled to roll over. A sharp pain shot through his stomach where Zenya had kicked him repeatedly. He gritted his teeth and rolled himself over anyway. Oh god. Then as he... Well, it sounded like I said then. Then. Fuck. Then. Then, as he floundered on the ground, his foot bumped into something. Nani? Curious, he looked back to see what furniture he might have hit, only to discover that someone else was lying on the floor beside him. Oh! Tetsuo. It was Tetsuo. His eyes were closed and he appeared to be unconscious. He's a beauty even though he's beaten up and on the ground. I'm not a sadist. Shh. He looks so peaceful. What was he doing here? Too confused to think, Yoji rolled over. Pain be damned. He observed Tetsuo carefully. He wasn't dead. His chest was rising and falling in slow, rhythmic measures. Upon further inspection, Yoji noticed bruising on his face that suggested he'd been beaten. Beaten? Yeah, beaten. Was this Zenya's doing? In the light of the cathode rays... What is that word? Tetsuo looked so unguarded, so vulnerable, so hurt. There was a bloody gash at the corner of his mouth, staining his thin lips. What had he done to deserve this? As he stared in confusion, Yoji suddenly smelled at something else. Something familiar. And then, without warning, he felt his body grow hot. His pulse quickened and his chest tightened. Oh. What's happening? Oh. Bro. He's not human, is he? Oh, and we've probably established that. After that, everything was a blur. Partway through, Tetsuo woke and took charge. Yo, what is happening? Finally, Yoji lost consciousness. Darkness. Something wasn't right. Later that night, Zenya stood in the dark room, staring at the floor. This prefab shed was located directly beside the Okinaga house. It was used for storage and was mostly empty save for a desk and chair. Atop the desk sat a television, its screen gone to static. It cast a deathly pale light over Zenya's features. Is he sweating or crying? I think he's sweating. He'd made an effort to air the place out, but the scent of incense still lingered faintly. That rhymed. Wait, no, it's just similar words. It was enough to make the blood throb in his veins. And yet, Zenya squatted down and touched the floor with his index finger. Yoji had been here, and Tetsuo next to him. Nothing had gone according to plan. By all rights, Tetsuo should have lost his mind. Failing that, he should have at least displayed some kind of physical response. Zenya had watched the whole thing from his room via the spy camera attached to the TV on the desk. As for the TV itself, he'd only left it on to spite them. Hoping that the constant buzz of the static would make make them feel even worse. That was more or less the amount of forethought Zenya had put into his little show. He'd had two goals: to put Tetsuo in his place, and to reveal Yoji's true nature. But the plan had failed. At no point had Tetsuo lost his composure. He hadn't even batted an eyelid. But this smell, Zenya inhaled sharply. It was designed to work as an aphrodisiac. Oh god, forcing susceptible individuals into heat. It was only effective on Zenya's kind, and there was no question Yoji had been under its influence. The scent had awakened his dormant instincts, which had swiftly overwhelmed Yoji's reason. It was simply impossible to resist the urge once it came. Indeed, it should have been impossible for anyone to maintain their composure in a situation like that. Yoji's touch should have inflamed even the coldest heart, precipitating the rapid and total loss of control. And yet, Tetsuo had remained stoic to the end. Was this proof that he wasn't human? Was he the same as Zenya? No, that couldn't be. If he were one of them, then he would have reacted to the incense. He didn't fit into either category. So what was he? Jesus. Zenya threw a savage kick at the desk. As it toppled over, the television fell to the floor with a deafening crash. All at once, the room went dark. Zenya hated what he couldn't understand. He needed everything to be simple and clear. If he couldn't tell what something was at a glance, well, better that it not exist at all. He hated people like Tetsuo, of course, but more than that, he hated all of the myriad, I don't even know, expressions that other people used to hide their true feelings. Fake smiles, sympathetic tears, anger professed on another's behalf. You had to decode them if you wanted to know what they meant, and that was more than Zenya could bear. It would be so much easier to relate to people if they all had faces like a child's drawings.
Shironuma Tetsuo.
Zenya summoned those cool, collected features into his mind's eye. Kitani's research into the man's background had turned up nothing of note. He was an ordinary human, but he didn't act like one. Worse, he dared to approach Yoji. It needed to end. Now. He gave the desk another good kick, then headed for the door. His covered eye had begun to ache, as if awakened by his rage. Soon, I'll wipe that look off your face. And then I'll make you wish you were dead. Smiling to himself. My throat. Zenya slowly licked his lips. I need water. Pumped spring water. I thought it said pure spring water. Wow. How many times now had he woken up like this? As Yoji opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was a dark, cloudy sky. The night was quiet, the air chill against his skin. Once again, he had awoken to find himself elsewhere. One thing was certain, he must have passed out again. Exasperated with himself, he attempted to get up. And I burped again. Yep. Splendid. All the muscles in his body screamed in protest. His head was throbbing too. He was a total wreck. The reason for his fatigue, at least, was obvious, but he did his best not to think about it as he climbed gingerly to his feet. As soon as he got a look around, he realized that he'd been lying in his building's trash dump area. He was overcome by the impulse to laugh. Yo, what? It was just so absurd. stupid, fucked up. One way to describe it. Pathetic. The words rose in his mind, then were carried away on a wave of fragmented memories. Zenya. The dark room, the pale light, the clawing smell of incense, the pain in his head and body, the fever that had seized control. Tetsuo. Emotions he could not name welled up inside him, and he covered his mouth with the back of his hand, stifling the urge to scream. Why? Why? The questions kept multiplying. The entire situation was just pathetic. He felt like a pawn in someone else's game, forced to dance to the whims of some malevolent puppet master. As a pawn, he would never see the whole picture. He would be pushed around, one move at a time, until he was ultimately sacrificed for some greater purpose. Yoji trudged to his apartment on leaden legs. As soon as he got inside, he went to his room and threw himself down on the bed. And I need a burp again. Yep. He didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to think. He didn't even bother turning the lights on, just buried his head, in the blankets. Their familiar softness offered him a sense of security, and he closed his eyes. Right now, even the creak of the spring sounded like music to his ears. As he lay there, order gradually returned to his thoughts, and he finally began to process the day's events. Zenya had wanted to talk. Yoji had followed him outside, where Zenya had proceeded to beat him unconscious. He'd awoken in that weird little room. Tetsuo had been there, too. His wounds just as keep delaying a bit. Tetsuo had been there, too. Yeah, boy. His wounds just as bad. No, even worse than Yoji's. Why had Zenya brought Tetsuo along? Jealousy. I'm just joking. He's Tetsuo is apparently just human. I don't know. Maybe they're gonna feast on him. He couldn't begin to fathom the reason, but with Zenya in the equation, that was hardly surprising. In any case, Yoji had awoken to find Tetsuo beside him, and then Yoji hadn't been himself at the time. His body had been in total control, but Tetsuo had seemed as calm as ever. He should have been able to push Yoji away, but he hadn't. Why? Wait. What if Tetsuo and Zenya were working together? It seemed extremely unlikely. After all, Tetsuo had been roughened up pretty badly himself. But could he really discount the possibility? Tetsuo and Zenya had both approached Yoji around the same time. Prior to that, he'd never so much as spoken to either of them. Furthermore, Zenya had always quick to mention Tetsuo. Could their supposed lack of connection be a facade? Do I say facade or facade? Questions. If he had to reach for an explanation as to Tetsuo's injuries, they could have been self-inflicted. It was possible. But even if that had been the case, Yoji still didn't understand why the two of them would team up in the first place. Ugh, struggled burp, mate. Hell yeah. Opening his eyes, he shifted his gaze to the mellow light of the aquarium. Not human? Zenya's words echoed in his ears. By all measures, a ridiculous statement, but right now it carried a profound weight. He didn't actually believe it, of course, but with everything that had been happening to him lately, he was starting to get anxious. Even if he wasn't inhumane per se, he suspected that there might be something strange behind his symptoms. Even more strange was the fact that Zenya seemed to know something about his condition. And if Tetsuo knew too, That would explain his lack of surprise at the blood. Rolling over, Yoji stared up at the dark ceiling. Maybe he should try talking to Tetsuo just one more time. Frankly, after what had happened, Yoji didn't want to see him, much less talk to him. But the memory of Tetsuo's stoic gaze made Yoji reconsider. Tetsuo hadn't lost control like he had. The look in his eyes had been identical to how he always appeared at school. Maybe he would have some answers. Just then, a sharp pain in his gut made him whimper. His stomach was extremely tender after Zenya's beating. Yoji still didn't understand what he'd done to deserve it. He wanted a reason, at the very least, a reason why these things kept happening. As the night wore on, Yoji glared up at the ceiling, anger and resolve smoldering in his breast. Yep, we need answers, bro. No more foreshadowing. The next morning, Yoji dragged his sluggish, aching body into the shower before heading to school. The warm water seeped into his wounds and sharpened his mind. In the mirror, he could see bruises all over his body. The sight was unpleasant, to say the least. Still, at least he knew, oh my god, he knew what had caused those. Better straightforward beating than mystery symptoms and hallucinations. The only thing keeping him going was the desire to learn more about the recent string of incidents. Even the smallest tidbit of information would be something. First, he needed to talk to Tetsuo. His goal set, Yoji left the apartment. Yeah, boy. 2A. The moment he arrived at the classroom, he looked toward the windows. Tetsuo was reading at his desk, an island of calm amid the early morning chatter. On the any other day, that was where he would have stopped. But today, he marched straight up to his quarry. I think I've said that right. Pronunciation is not my forte. He knew that if he left... I'm going great today. That if he let doubt take hold for even a moment, that would be the end. Tetsuo noticed him approaching, pulled his glasses off, and looked up. Their eyes met. Yoji felt a surge of anxiety. At the same time, something felt ever so slightly off. But right now, Yoji didn't have the mental capacity to think about it.
昼休み
But he's still talking.
昼休み旧校舎の屋上に来いよ
Okay. Yoji spoke in a quiet, firm voice so that only Tetsuo would hear, then turned and walked away. He wasn't about to wait for Tetsuo's answer. A few students appeared to have been watching their exchange, but they looked away as soon as Yoji glanced at them. Arriving at his desk, he took a seat and struggled to process what he had just done. Then the morning hymn began to play over the loudspeaker. As Yoji stood for assembly, he hardened his resolve. All he could do now was wait for lunch to roll around. Darkness. I'm gonna say that every time it occurs, or obscurity, just to be, 1800 style. Wow, I could have just clicked the fucking screen. God damn it. Morning classes ended, and the bell rang, signaling the start of lunchtime. Immediately, Yoji stood up and left the room. Cutting through the courtyard, he entered the old building and headed for the roof. With every step up the musty old staircase, his nerves grew worse and worse. Tetsuo hadn't exactly agreed to meet him, so there was no guarantee he would show up at all. When he'd left the classroom, Yoji had purposely avoided looking at him. Somehow, he didn't want to... I'm just joking. Somehow, he didn't want to know whether Tetsuo planned on her turning up. Yep, on turning up. Arriving at the door to the rooftop, Yoji pulled it open and stepped out onto the roof. There was no sign of anyone else, just a wide open swath of concrete. Would he come? Yoji walked over to the fence and leaned back against it. His gaze dropped to the floor, and he absently scuffed his shoes against the concrete. Every minute seemed to last an eternity. Maybe Tetsuo wasn't coming. Should he even bother waiting for him? Giving up was sounding better and better. Jump scare. Just then, the door opened and Tetsuo stepped out onto the roof. Yoji felt his heart beat faster. I was about to say faster and faster. Faster as the other man approached. Then he saw it. Tetsuo's bruises were gone. That was what had felt off. That was what had felt off in the classroom. Back in that room, wherever it was Zenya had taken them, Tetsuo had been injured. Yoji had touched the bruises himself. Had it been a trick of the dim lighting? Fuck no. No, he'd felt the swelling. Then how? Tetsuo walked right up to Yoji and leaned against the fence next to him. Yoji stared blankly at his face, but couldn't see any trace of his injuries. How was that possible? He felt his mistrust of Tetsuo growing. Maybe Tetsuo really was working with Zenya. He'd dismissed the idea last night, but what if he'd faked those injuries? Suspicion morphed into anger, and Yoji shot Tetsuo a glare.
どういうことなのか。何が
Yeep. Yeet. I meant okay, Tetsuo's composure fanned Yoji's rage. It felt like proof that he knew everything.
昨日のことだよ。お前、沖永とグルなんじゃないのか。
Sorry. Tetsuo didn't answer, but Yoji wasn't feeling patient, and this only frustrated him further.
何か言えよ。俺も。
Tetsuo paused for a moment.
よくわかんねえよ。いきなり殴られて。気づいたらあなただ。嘘だ。
Sorry, did I cut him off? I don't know. Yoji refused to accept that for an answer.
ふざけてるのか。冗談も大概にしろよ。
He looks so different in this frame, in this sprite. Pretty eyes. Once again, Tetsuo said nothing. Surely, if he were innocent, he would defend himself, right? What the hell was his problem?
嘘じゃないなら否定しろ。とにかく、本当のことを言えよ。
More than the dishonesty, it was Tetsuo's attitude that Yoji found truly infuriating. Even now, he couldn't tell what Tetsuo was thinking. Was he connected to Zenya? What did he know about Yoji's condition? There were so many questions Yoji wanted to ask, but the most pressing of them all was, why had Tetsuo touched him like that, there in that dark room? Oh. With Tetsuo standing right in front of him, the memory was clearer than ever. At the same time, he felt a strange ache deep inside. His gut throbbed faintly, almost as if he'd grown a second heart. Then he realized what it was. The same sensation he'd felt in that room and before every one of his recent attacks. It always happened the same way. His pulse raced. His breath grew ragged. These were the signs that he was losing control, which meant he didn't have much time. Without conscious thought, his body turned toward the door. But Tetsuo grabbed his arm from behind. I bet an option will appear here. Oh, no. CG.
待てよ。
Hold up. Grab the wall. Wiggle, wiggle, wiggle.
触るな。
Shit. Reason. Shit. Instinct. Reason. Hang on. Let me double check. Gotta double check my shit. Oh. Yeah, this is, yeah, reason. Cause Zenya. We're going for Zenya, man. Trusting Zenya for no goddamn apparent reason. He's, yeah. Yoji yanked on his arm, trying to shake Tetsuri off.
話せよ
Prying Tetsuri's fingers off, Yoji dashed away. Flinging open the door, he bolted down the stairs and out of the old building. Just as he was cutting through the courtyard, however, he felt a sudden sharp pain in his bowels. Gritting his teeth, Yoji hurtled into the main building and down the hall to the restroom, the same one Tetsuri had dragged him into previously. He darted into a stall, locked the door, and put both hands on the wall in front of him. His head hung as he grimaced in pain. His body knew what was going to happen next. There was no stopping it, no matter how hard he tried. The pain in his gut swelled as something grew inside him. It's happening. With sweaty hands, Yoji loosened his belt and lowered his pants and underwear. His entrance burned as the first trickle slid down his thighs. Shame filled his heart to bursting. All he could do was gasp for a breath and wait for the nightmare to end. The swelling in his abdomen grew rapidly until it was almost too much to bear. Then finally, the tension drained from his body. His crushing despair was accompanied by a wet plop. Yoji squeezed his eyes shut, willing himself not to look. But even without confirmation, he knew what was there. The memory unfolded behind his eyelids, every bit as vivid as the real thing. A puddle of blood with a red lump floating in it. The lump is covered in thick, veiny lines. It twitches like a little heart. A little heart? Jeez. Yoji pulled his hands away from the wall and pressed them to his face. He refused to look. He wouldn't accept it. But at the same time, he knew that it wouldn't stop. We're not human. Yoji whimpered, biting back a scream. If no one could tell him what was happening to his body, then maybe he really wasn't human. There was no light at the end of his tunnel. It took all the strength he had just to stifle his sobs. Intense. Shit. It's a definite mystery. After he had dressed himself, Yoji walked out of the boys' bathroom, leaving his mess behind. Fucking beautiful, mate. Fucking janitor comes in, oh shit. Not that humans can see it. He knew there was a chance someone might see it. Wait, if Tetsuri is human, then why did he see the blood on the back of his neck? Like what? That's the question. Shit. But he just didn't have the energy to clean it up. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror as he walked by. All the colour had drained from his face. Even his lips were as pale as a corpse's. He felt absolutely awful. Unable to summon the willpower to go to the nurse's office, Yoji staggered back to class. My fist is crippled. Shit. Why do I lean on it? Fucking... Ow. Finally. Class has ended. As Yoji quickly packed up his things, Makoto walked up with a concerned expression. Oh, Makoto, he's alive.
顔色すごい悪いけど平気
Jeez, bro. I'm Lucifer.
ちょっと体調が良くなくて。
そっかじゃあ早く帰った方がいいよな
That's a good idea, but then I'd be left alone with myself. Makoto looked up, as if he had something more to say. Hesitation was written all over his face.
聞いてもいいか
You can ask him Or if I'm on my period. But
何を
it seems like it.
今日白沼に何か用とかあったのか？朝話しかけてたみたいだったから。
You was right. You was definitely right, Makoto. Oh. Well, that is the question. Okay. Instinct. Here we go. He's quiet and mysterious, but he does have instinct. It's like a monstrosity is trying to take over him. At Tetsuo's name, Yoji felt a twinge of annoyance. He tried to hide it, but he had a feeling it might have shown on his face.
別に。
なんでもないって。
He looks a bit different in his frame. Makoto dropped his gaze to his shoes, then ran a hand over the back of his head.
そりゃまあ、確かに
You do that.
俺は関係ねえけどさ。
Yoji knew that Makoto was probably just worried about him, but at the same time, just leave me alone. Yoji looked away, ashamed of the thought.
ごめん。今日
ああ、うん。
Fuck's sake. Work.
ごめん。今日はもう帰る。
You just like
それじゃあ、
so
またな。
slowly. Makoto smiled awkwardly and gave a slight wave. Yoji replied with a nod, then grabbed his book bag and headed for the door. At the lockers, he paused to change his shoes, then walked through the front doors. Squinting against the sunset, Yoji passed through the school gates. What door? I see no door. And headed for the train station. If he'd kept talking to Makoto, he had a feeling he would have exploded. He appreciated Makoto's concern, but at the same time it felt strange. Why was Makoto so concerned about him? Because they were friends? Were they? He considered the meaning of the word. That's the meaning of the word. Friends are people who get along, who enjoy spending time together, who share common interests. But none of these quite fit their relationship. He could see why Makoto had so many friends. He was a cheerful, thoughtful guy. Who wouldn't like him? There was no doubt that the time he spent with Makoto was one of the few bright spots in Yoji's life. But what did Yoji have to offer in return? Taken objectively, it all seemed so unclear. He just couldn't understand why Makoto was so nice to him. Makoto's other friends probably wondered the same thing. It didn't make any sense. All of a sudden, Yoji felt his anxiety spike, panic set in, and his chest grew tight. His hands moved on autopilot, pulling out his phone and starting a new email. After typing up a message that amounted to little more than pleasantries, he selected the recipient. I need to go back to school. Receipt. Gonna cry. Erica. It's your sister. Though part of him thought it, he forced himself to press send. He needed a reassurance. Any answer would do. But Erica still hadn't replied by the time he arrived at the train station. He sighed deeply. He knew he shouldn't expect her to be at his beck and call, but he couldn't help but feel disarmed. I'm going great today. It's just I'm hindrance by a lot of thoughts right now. Not bad thoughts. I'm like, my friend's waiting for me. You know, I'm just distracted. But feel disappointed, mate. Yeah. With another sigh, he tossed his phone back into his bag. On the way home, his anxiety remained constant, neither growing nor receding. He pushed his way through the crowds of people and boarded the packed train, clinging to a grabbed handle. He steadied himself as the train rattled down the track. In the end, Erica was the only person he knew he could trust completely. Of that alone he had no doubt. Same with my sibling. He's like, well, I'm his only best mate, basically. Pust. You know Okinaga, Zenya, right? The Yakuza's son. Total creep, am I right? You know, he's always kinda one corn dog short of a picnic. If you get my drift. Real loopy. Well, this was a rumour going around. Supposedly, he disappeared. He disappears every day at exactly 5 p.m. Isn't that weird? I thought so too at first. But people say he'll be screaming his head off 1 minute, then he'll go all quiet. And when they look around, he's just gone. I mean, hardly anybody sticks around that late anyways, so it's no surprise you don't hear about it much. Some people say they've seen him rolling around on the ground screaming. There are stories of his driver carrying him out of the building 2, stuff like that. Well, you know how Yuyake Kayake always plays at 5 p.m? They say he disappears right when it starts. Isn't that kind of creepy? Almost like a ghost story. I mean, he's not a ghost, but whatever he is, he's bad news. Yikes. Fucking preppy bitches. Oh, this is really distorted music. I'm worried. Zenya staggered down the hall, bracing himself against the wall as he went. Shit. The cursed bells beat against his eardrums, every note a scorching brand. Oh god, I'm uncomfortable with this music and his expression right now. Sweat trickled down his face and dripped from his chin.
失敗した。
He grimaced. It felt like someone had stuck a dagger in his right eye. Normally, he always made sure to leave school by 5 p.m, but today he'd lost track of time. It was their fault. Tetsuo and Yoji. Lately, he couldn't get them out of his mind. Illuminated by the setting sun, the hallway was devoid of life, and his groans of pain went unheard. Ahead, there was only a restroom and a storage closet. Hardly anybody would bother coming down this way. If he locked himself in the toilet stall, he could wait it out without being seen. On days 5 p.m. rolled around while he was still on campus, Zenya would often use this restroom as a hiding place. His body screamed in protest. It felt like his muscles and organs were expanding inside him, threatening to pop him like a meaty balloon. His left eye was blisteringly hot. Every day at 5 p.m, the last sight of day set the world ablaze before fading into the gentle night. This was the time Zenya's flesh came alive with joyous delirium. But that joy was Zenya's misery. As he coughed, the taste of iron spread in his mouth. Saliva and blood mixed in his throat, and he swallowed it down, fighting the urge to cough again. He barreled headlong into the boys' bathroom, stumbled into a stall, and locked the door behind him. And somebody came in. Leaning back against the door, Zenya gasped for breath, face raised to the ceiling as if begging God for mercy. Hands shaking, he clumsily dug his phone out of his pants and pressed the button for the speed dial. The phone rang again and again. Pick up. Answer, damn it. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. Crawling in my skin. I'm in my crawl. He tried to adjust his grip, but the phone slipped through his stiff fingers and fell to the floor with a clatter.
痛い。
I don't like that. seeing Zenya in pain for some reason. Ittai. Unable to muster the energy to retrieve it, Zenya slid down the stall door to the floor. His body felt like a thick branch bent nearly to breaking. His flesh demanded freedom, release. Pain, pain, endless pain. His nose stung, his eyes burned. Oh, no. I'll cry. I'm gonna cry. Poor baby. Tears slid down his cheeks as he sobbed. Though it tormented him every day, it never got any easier. The pain of being rebuilt from within. He could still hear his phone ringing.
早く来いよ。早く来い。早く早く早く早く。早く早く早く早く早く。
My heart. Shit. Tears continued to spill down his face as he chanted the word like a prayer. Surely it wouldn't be much longer. Every time Zenya was forced to hole up in the restroom, he always made sure to call. The song was ending, but his flesh still screamed. After what felt like hours, he heard the sound of footsteps dashing down the hall.
Bochan!
Oh, Bochan. A familiar voice echoed through the restroom. Please hug him. Please, for me. Zenya tried to call out a reply, but his voice was a faint croak. His lips were dry and cracked. Sniffling, he pounded on the stall door instead.
Bochan! 開けてください!
In a bit. The stall shook, and Zenya mustered the strength to lift his arm and unlock the door. Immediately, the door burst open and a pale-faced Kitani dashed inside. Gone was his usual composure. Kitani's chiseled features were rigid with fear. Even as he cried, Zenya couldn't help but think that he wore the look well.
Bochan.
Kitani took one look at Zenya and heaved a sigh of relief.
大丈夫ですか? 立てますか?
Zenya grabbed Kitani's hand and slowly heaved himself to his feet. His legs were shaking. It felt like the tile floor was made of soggy sponges. Kitani peered at Zenya's face, his brow furrowed.
違う.
His burly hand touched Zenya's wet right cheek. His eye was probably bleeding again.
遅い。遅いんだよ。バカ。うんこ。バカ。アホ。
Poopy head.
すみません。さあ、帰りましょう。
It's like a child in an adolescent's body. Nothing wrong with that. Kitani stooped down to pick up Zenya's phone. Zen, fuck's sake. Oh my god. Then he put the boy's arm over his shoulder. Zenya's tears had stopped, but his body was still a cacophony. I don't know how to pronounce that. Of pain. Every inch of him was sore.
少し我慢してください。
With Kitani's support, Zenya hobbled out of the bathroom. Careful to stay out of sight, they made their way to the side gates. Even with his head lolling, Zenya could see the colours of sunset illuminating everything around them. This was by far his least favourite time of day. It was the only time he actually preferred to be home. It was so much easier to just curl up in his room until the pain went away. Today had been a colossal fuck up. It was all their fault. All because Yoji and Tatsuro were driving him crazy. Just you wait. Shit. As Zenya endured the stabs of pain, he felt the corners of his mouth rise ever so slightly. Blaming it on them. God damn. Sorry. Kitani hadn't gotten much sleep last night. Perched on the edge of the dining room table, he pulled a cigarette from his pack and glanced up at the clock on the wall. That is really loud. Hang on. calm down. It was just past midnight. He lit the cigarette, took a long drag and exhaled slowly. Finally, he could feel himself begin to relax. Zenya had been holed up in his room ever since he'd gotten home from school. Whenever Katani put his ear to the door, he could hear the boy muttering to himself. As for Kunihito, he'd gone down to the underground chapel and had yet to come out. As he watched the smoke rise, Katani reflected on this miserable morning. Yesterday, they'd kidnapped Shiranuma Tetsuo on his way home, just as Zenya's plan had dictated. That had been an unpleasant experience, although Katani would have never refused an order. Beating up kids was not something he enjoyed. Then he remembered Sakiyama Yoji and how he'd passed out halfway through the ordeal in the shed. The sight of him all roughed up had turned Katani's stomach. He would have preferred to carry... This fucking soundtrack is right in my ears right now. Sorry, it's getting annoying. Shut the fuck up. Even my voice is aggravating. I apologize. He would have preferred to carry the boy all the way back into his apartment, but he couldn't risk being seen. Instead, Katani had been forced to leave him in the trash dump nearby. At one point, he'd asked Zenya if he worried they might report the assault, but the younger Okinaga had laughed it off. Those two? Not a chance. A sigh left his lips in a cloud of smoke. Back in the gang, he'd done plenty of things to be ashamed of, but Katani's policy had never harmed the innocent. Shit. Especially women and kids. That was still true now that he'd left that life behind. Man, I gotta do something about this. Fucking conflict menu. Is this? No, it's the background music. It's still the same. Exit. That was still true now that he'd left that life behind. No matter how much he told himself he'd been doing his job, it weighed on him. Still, that Shiranuma Tetsuo was something else. No matter how hard Katani had punched him, he'd barely even blinked. It had felt like years before he'd passed out from the tranquilizer shot. Honestly, Tetsuo had held out longer than most gangsters would. The memory of that stony gaze still lingered in Katani's mind. There was a dark light hidden behind those eyes. It was the kind of look that chilled you to the bone. He'd seen Tetsuo walk by a few times before, while waiting outside the school gates for Zenya. His aura was so unlike the other students that Katani had found his eyes drawn to him. For some reason, it felt like he'd met Tetsuo before, but he couldn't quite place where. Well, deja vu? Maybe his brain was mixing him up with someone else. Exhaling another cloud of smoke, Katani glanced up at the clock again. Perhaps it was time to go check on Kunihito. He put out his cigarette in the ashtray, then left the dining room and walked down the hall. He descended the staircase, then gingerly opened the old faded door to the chapel. He could hear the older man praying inside, of course. Katani pressed his back to the wall and closed his eyes. He didn't have to actually see Kunihito to know what he was doing. Day in and day out, it was always the same thing. Beneath the flickering candlelight, Kunihito would face the altar and pray.
どうか怒りをお鎮めください。どうかお願いします。どうか。
But today something was off. Katani opened his eyes. Normally, Kunihito's prayers bordered on his stereo, but this time his voice was a little more than a whisper. Katani peeked into the chapel and a shiver shot down his spine. Something's happening. Kunihito was holding something up to the altar. It looked like a furry lump, okay. Reading it right? Yep, very. About the size of a cat or a small dog. Fuck. No. No. Was it some kind of animal? Whatever it was dripping. I am going to slap the shit out of your father. Oh no. Oh no. No. Could Kunihito have killed it? But why? Fucking sacrifices, religion, man. He knew the answer. It was an offering.
あなた方の恨み、この私が決して忘れはしません。キャツに否定されて、あなた方は人の形を取ることすら許されなかった。さぞ我らを憎んでいることでしょう。
He's this far gone.
ですが、どうか怒りをお鎮めください。どうか。
With his eyes wide and mouth gaping, he looked like a demon in the candlelight. Something hot and heavy rose in Katani's chest. Was it too late? Was there no going back to how things had been, to the old Kunihito? A powerful leader who commanded the loyalty of countless men. Just then, Kunihito glanced over his shoulder. He must have sensed that he wasn't alone. The moment he spotted Katani watching him, his face contorted with rage.
北に何をぼさっと見ているのだ。
Because I'm in disbelief. He strode up to Katani and grabbed him by the collar, shaking him so hard he threatened to send them both toppling down to the floor. Caught off guard, Katani fell to his knees.
お前もひれ伏せ。その不尊を詫びるのだ。神の寵愛を独占し、神の似姿を与えられた己を恥じろ。
Oh, I disdain this guy now. Seriously. Kunihito was completely incoherent. It sounded like he was angry not that Katani had seen, but rather that Katani hadn't paid his respects. No way, man. No respect for that. Well, not for you. Yep. Kunihito grabbed the animal corpse off the floor and thrust it in Katani's face. It was crushed, its original form indiscernible.
貴様もこんな姿になりたいか。こんな姿しか与えられなかったあの方々の無念がわかるのか。
Disgust gave way to sorrow and pity. He touched Kunihito's bloody arm and kept his voice as soft as possible.
親父は何を崇めているのですか。
神などいない。ここに負わすのは神に見捨てられたる亡霊の念だ。
Is that even a word? Forsook. Spittle flew from Kunihito's mouth.
大洪水、ソドムとゴモラ。かつてあまたの人々が無慈悲な神の審判によって命を奪われた。彼らは天国への門を閉ざされたばかりでなく、再び神の似姿を身にまとうことすら許されなかったのだ。その結果がこれだ。彼らは人ならざる姿に身を落としてなお、今も神の子らと嘘吹いてはばからぬ我々を呪い、たたっているのだ。
What nonsense are you on about, man?
ああ、ミュルメ・コレオン。生きることすら許されないからだ。
Once upon a time, Okinaga Kunihito had been a devout Christian. He was not a man who showed weakness, and so he'd never spoken of his beliefs publicly. Only those closest to him had known the truth, that whenever he put his hands together for a meal, it wasn't the gods of Japan to whom he prayed. But though he'd kept it locked tightly inside his chest. Yeah, equivalent. Katani knew that his faith had been sincere. Katani had never been a believer himself, but Kunihito's influence had led him to start reading the Bible in secret. So even without a thorough understanding of the doctrine, Katani knew enough to be certain of one thing. Whatever beliefs drove Kunihito now, they definitely weren't Christian. How fucking insane. Insanity. It had all begun with a single bullet during a shootout with a rival gang. Kunihito. Did I say rival? Rival? No, it's the rival. Kunihito had taken a bullet to the head. Well, he got brain damage, man. Seriously. The doctors had narrowly managed to save his life. Wish they hadn't, to be honest, after what just happened. But afterwards, he would often start ranting about evil spirits that no one else could see. Despite this, Kitani had decided to follow Kunihito to the bitter end. Kunihito was still the man who'd taken him in. If Kitani's loyalty could be shaken so easily, then it would have faltered long ago. He would serve the Okinagas until he took his dying breath. But facts were facts. Kunihito was getting worse, and Kitani couldn't pretend that he was concerned about the older man's mental health. He had no intention of leaving. He was just afraid of where this was headed.
私には見える。彼らはそこかしこにいる。闇の中から我々を見つめる怨念の眼差しが。
I know it's purely psychological, but then again, I don't think it is too. It must be. Yeah, I'm not gonna suspect anything. There's clearly a story to this, a supernatural side, if that's the right word. Kunihito had returned to his solitary prayers, as though he'd forgotten Kitani's presence. There was no longer any point in being here. His heart heavy, Kitani left Kunihito to his delusions. Yeah, goodbye. Goodbye, animal abuser. Ugh. It's funny because most serial killers, get like a bump on their head or something, like, I don't know why they have a head injury and then, like, it commences those serial killer tendencies, but it also happens because of their upbringing, depends on all of that, but it's a common pattern. Yeah. It reeked of gasoline. The air was so hot, he could scarcely breathe. His lungs were burned every time he tried. Through his blurry vision, he could make out shades of red and black mixed together. Is this behind the eye patch? It was sweltering. Some part of his body hurt like hell, he wasn't sure which. Something was crushing him, he couldn't move. He could hear what sounded like the wind howling. Then he realized that he was surrounded by flame. The temperature around him was rising. He couldn't breathe. Something exploded nearby. A rumble shook his aching body. Sensing danger, he tried to escape. But when he tried to move whatever was on top of him, his hands touched something slimy. He lowered his gaze to his stomach. A blood-soaked lump of flesh was sitting there. Oh no. Terrified, he tried to scream, but nothing came out. Yet his throat went raw from the effort. The flesh crawled toward his face, throbbing. Bloody hovels rose from its veiny, membranous surface. He flailed, but his lower body refused to budge. It was as though he had turned to stone. No. Stay away. I can't yell that. No. And we're awake. Yoji's eyes snapped open as he awoke with a start. Panicked and disoriented, he quickly looked around. He was in his room. At last reality set in. It had all been a dream. He heaved a sigh of relief. His heart was pounding a mile a minute. Every inch of his body was soaked with sweat. Inhaling slowly to steady his breathing, he reached out with a trembling hand to brush the hair out of his face. He was sure he had just had a nightmare, but for some reason, he couldn't remember the details. The images were too fuzzy. There weren't enough to piece together what had taken place. Whatever it had been, it was probably an abstract manifestation of all he'd been through over the past few weeks. His body was still plagued with crippling dread, likely a lingering effect of the nightmare. Yet somehow, he also felt a strange sense of nostalgia. Nostalgic for a nightmare? That couldn't be right. Gradually, his heart rate slowed and he decided to go for a glass of water. But as he got out of bed, his legs gave out. His body pitched sideways, falling toward the aquarium. His hand shot out and grabbed the shelf for support, narrowly managing to keep himself upright. Relieved, Yoji looked down at the aquarium next to him. The water's surface rippled from the vibrations, but the fish was still swimming peacefully. They hadn't even noticed. If he hadn't caught himself, he might have knocked the aquarium over, and the fish would have died on the floor. That's dark. He was the reason they could keep on swimming. Keep on swimming. Their lives were in his hands. They were at the mercy of a higher power. Could the same be said for Yoji too? Was his life in another's hands? If so, then whose? Something caught in his chest. His heart ached. Like a lingering trace of his forgotten dream, it stirred his emotions, sadness and fear. Putting a hand to his forehead, Yoji left the room and headed to the kitchen. Well, darkness again. I may have to end it soon. After downing a glass of water, Yoji returned to his bedroom and sat down on the sofa. He unplugged his phone from the charger and checked the display. No reply from Erika. Normally, as long as it wasn't too late at night, she would always text or call back quickly. It wasn't like her to take this long. He contemplated giving her a call, but changed his mind once he saw the time. She might already be asleep. Plugging his phone back in, he lay down on his bed. His perspiration had dried, and his shirt felt cold against his back. As he stared up at the ceiling, images floated up unbidden through his mind. Shock, confusion, fear. These were normal reactions to having your world upended. With his weak constitution, death had been a spectre in Yoji's life for as long as he could remember. But no matter how hard he tried to prepare for any given scenario, reality always outdid his imagination in the worst possible way. The more he thought, the more pessimistic those thoughts became. He rolled over and closed his eyes, and drowsiness soon washed over him. Just then, he heard a soft buzzing.